And I think over the years, um, running engineering teams and then consulting with teams, I've changed my thinking on what this is and what this looks like. And coming from being an engineer myself, it when you're in it, sometimes it can be hard to realize the whole point of being a professional engineer in the first place. And really, it boils down to your success isn't about ultimately, it isn't about building anything. It is about making sure that you understand your customers, how well you're.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are joining us from. Welcome. My name is Jacob Scott, and I'm a part of the field marketing team here at Pluralsight, and I'm thrilled to have you with me here today. We have a jam-packed event ahead of us, filled with individuals here to inspire and educate us. Here is a brief overview of today's agenda. There will be one fireside chat and a demo featuring workforce transformation. All right, let's get started. Today's fireside chat will feature engineering thought leader, author, and trainer Patrick Kuo, along with Amazon's Christopher Logan, Senior Manager of Solutions Architect. Moderating today's fireside chat is Pluralsight's Austin Bagley. Over to you, Austin.
All right. Thank you so much, Jacob. Appreciate it. And we'll welcome Patrick and Christopher as well. So yeah, this is great. Christopher has been an engineering leader for 15 years. Prior to joining AWS as a leader over their solutions architecture team, he was the VP of engineering for Deputy, a workforce management solution based out of Sydney. On that last note, Chris is still in Sydney. It is very early in the morning, so we're definitely excited to have you here with us today. Patrick, on the other hand, has also been a seasoned technology leader for over 20 years. He's a speaker, author, former CTO, and which is really cool, chief scientist. Maybe we can spend a moment how you made that switch. He's actually currently in Berlin, which is where we found him. Incidentally, he is also from Australia. So I'm not sure how we did this, but we happened to get overloaded with Aussies today, which is great. If you haven't already, he runs a really cool curated newsletter called Runs Level Up or Level Up. So maybe Jacob, maybe we should post a link to that as well. So if you've subscribed to our Engineering Impact newsletter, you may have heard of these two before. We had a chance to sit down and interview these two and really talk about their approach to engineering leadership. We liked that conversation so much, we invited them back today. And I want to remind everyone, this is now a live event. Just like Jacob mentioned, if you look at the bottom, there's a Q&A button. If you're actually live streaming this, you actually can switch over to Zoom if you'd like, and click on that Q&A button, ask questions. I will be monitoring that as I go through this fireside chat, and we'll definitely get those questions out and have a chance for Patrick and Christopher to respond to those. But let's jump in. Christopher, you talk a lot about this concept of bottoms-up leadership and having your engineering teams, solve problems themselves. Tell me more about this. How do you foster that on your teams?
It's a good question, and I think over the years, running engineering teams and then consulting with teams, I've changed my thinking on what this is and what this looks like. And coming from being an engineer myself, when you're in it, sometimes it can be hard to realize the whole point of being a professional engineer in the first place. And really, it boils down to your success ultimately, it isn't about building anything. It is about making sure that you understand your customers, how well you're giving them something that they need and want, at the same time creating value for your business. And then when you think of leadership is about pulling people together, motivating them, giving them the direction, and making sure it's the right direction at the right time. So what I try to do is link engineers to the customers in the business, as fundamentally as I possibly can. When you're a leader of engineers, you're ultimately one person, and the decisions that you make boil down to your own localized experience and your localized skill. Now, if I can do my best to pull the engineers and product managers and designers together and to the customers, then the insight and the decision that is made is considerably more informed, measured, agile, quick, than it would be if it was just one person. Then as a leader, then I can add my experience and help guide it and direct it if it doesn't feel quite right. But what I found is that by linking engineers to ultimately end goal and the end user, it brings them to the table, and it brings them to the point where they want to lead those things and they're connected to it. And it quite often brings them back to the reason why they took the role on in the first place. Also, I think it ties them into an inherent value of things like testing and security as well. So that bottom-up leadership is critical to the whole system working, where you get rid of a lot of these bottlenecks and you get rid of yourself as the one that has to make any decision.
No, I love that. It was a really great comment, Christopher. Like, we've all been probably on the opposite side of that, where you feel disconnected from what's going on. You're taking, work off the top of the stack, or heaven forbid, like your project just got canceled, like why, and so your real effort is to actually just connect them and bring that closer together and make them feel, and really I'm feeling this theme of empowering engineers. Your job now as a leader went from being a product specialist to being someone who's actually like serving those engineers. I love that. Yep. Patrick, you have a kind of a related concept. You call it managing the environment, not the engineers. Tell me more about that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the traps that a lot of first-time engineering managers fall into is they think they have to manage every individual on their team. And one of the things I remind a lot of those engineering managers when they're stepping into that role is, you're dealing with adults, people who learn, people who problem solve. A lot of the time they can self-manage themselves, but they probably need to understand what they're optimizing for, or what boundaries they should be creating good solutions for. And that's really about that environment. I think I'll build on one of the examples that Christopher talked about, which is, trying to get engineers close to customers. Depending on how you manage your structure, you might make that a lot more difficult. And I've worked in organizations and consulted with organizations like this, where it's maybe user researchers or customer service people who only have contact with customers, and then everything is handed off through documents or processes through many organization layers or many other teams. And that's what I really think about with thinking about the structure and the system is, sort of inspired by a lot of the Drucker of a lot of the behavior you get is determined by the system. And, a lot of people focus on people and individuals. But when you swap people out, you'll generally get the same behavior because the system is creating that behavior. And so when I think about managing structures, particularly about flow through the team or the things that are blocking that, it's not often caused because of one individual on that sort of team. It's often because of the sort of structure or the system that they're set up. and maybe what their reward systems are or different sort of goals. A lot of those sort of systems can create a lot of conflict in teams. And so that's what I really think about when I think about managing structures, probably because as much as I like to encourage individual leadership and people to take ownership of problems, some people don't feel empowered to own certain areas, right? So when you think about team structures or departmental goals, it's going to be out of the reach of an individual engineer to change or shift that. They might be able to influence it if they have a good enough relationship with, the directors or the people who are setting the goal-setting system, but it's sort of the upper level management or leaders who are responsible for that. And so that's what I always encourage leaders and managers to think about is, what is the structure or system they're creating? What are the behaviors and, sometimes the disincentives or incentives for negative behavior? Because, you can manage individuals, but once again, if you replace the individuals and you don't change that system, you'll probably get that behavior again from the new individuals who join.
Right. No, I mean, that's super key in terms of, are we actually incentivizing the right things? Are we actually aiming the right direction? Let's dive into that for a moment. I imagine many in the call are maybe newer in engineering leadership. Obviously, they've become an engineering leader because they're an incredible engineer, and it's sometimes overwhelming to kind of jump into this for the first time and start thinking about systems and how I'm going to bring customers close. Like what, and this is a question to both of you, like what's step one? Like what's the first thing I should do as a new manager in order to take advantage of these approaches, which you've found to be valuable for your teams?
Patrick, do you want to
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll jump in. So I think for me, one thing that I think about is individuals are different because they're individual. And so when you get a team together, the dynamic between them will differ. And I think one of the first things that I tend to think about is, is the team working as a team? So are the collection of individuals measured by what they produce individually, or are they actually helping each other? Because what I really care about is everyone is working as a sort of team. So once I think the team is actually working like a team and not just a group of individuals, I would then be thinking about, is there clarity about what the team's mission or purpose is? So connected maybe to the customer, what is the impact that they're having on the customers? Is it about attracting growth? Is it about, improved quality? Things change over time, but I want the team to be very clear about its particular mission and goal. And once they have that, I'd then be thinking about, is there clarity about the way that they work? So this is where there's clear expectations amongst the team, within the team, about how everyone contributes as a team member, and how they all contribute towards that shared team goal. So that would be sort of, I guess, 3 tips that I would give new first-time managers.
No, that's great. And maybe actually a little bit of a different question for you, Christopher. How do you know it's working? Like, what are your signals that you pick up on to see, like, are the systems and the changes I'm making to my team actually resulting in a better situation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So for me, I think it's there's a bunch of data that you can use to do that. I also take a reasonably philosophical approach to it. So in terms of the data, things like cycle times getting too long, and there's no right, cycle time should be this many days or this many weeks. But you can notice a trend over time as to whether things are getting too far out or not. Engineering feedback, just in one-on-ones or in team feedback, customer satisfaction, or whether it's NPS or anything else that you use there. Estimates from engineering teams going, stretching longer than what you've historically seen. Turnover in your team. But 2 of the biggest things that I find, which are hard to measure, but it's about whether the team is taking risks and whether they're experimenting. Because what that shows is that the team isn't really operating as a team. Because what you tend to find is when people get together and they're motivated to do the right thing, and like we said before, being connected to the end user, they will take those risks. They will do those experiments, and a non-functional team won't do that sort of stuff because there's internal things going on. Also, if there's a lack of changes to processes, I've found that really good operating teams will constantly be trying to get better. And if you find a team that doesn't do that, that's a warning sign in itself.
I mean, that really brings it back to that first question for me, Christopher, because you talked about this idea of bottoms-up leadership, and the reason you know it's working is you now have a team that is actually bringing things up. You know, they're pushing the boundaries, they're connecting with customers. I want to change this process because I don't like it as an engineer, which I really love. And you know, you can use also the data side of those things, cycle times, how are we collaborating to really provide that objective angle towards that. So I love how this balance you have between, you know, is the team pushing the needle, and you know, are we operating to our past expectations and our future expectations, which I think is a brilliant way to kind of think about breaking that problem down and really saying, are we on the right track?
Yeah,
so
one of the best pieces of advice for a new leader I found is don't make yourself the center of attention. Right? It's ultimately not about you proving yourself to be a good leader. It's about, is the team doing well? If the team's doing well, ultimately, you know, you will be seen to be a better leader. And I find a lot of people who start that engineering leadership are out there to feel like they have to prove themselves in it. And I think it's the wrong approach there.
Yeah, you know, and it's not for everybody too. Like, you can be a seasoned engineer your entire life, you know, and continue that progression. And most companies are doing it right. No, that's the case. And either want it, or you want to just keep, you know, getting more and more adept at your specific area. So I love that. I want to kind of move on because a couple of things you said, and I think this really brings us to the next big conversation piece, which is collaboration. One of the big themes we want to talk today about is engineering collaboration, which on the surface sounds like a very soft term, like, oh, that's cute, like you guys are collaborating, you know. But like what we've found with the data, we'll show that more with Lilac when we come and talk about flow, is that how vital and important it is to have the team that's working well together, and like to your point, Christopher, pushing the needle. So like first things, questions to you both. You know, when I say engineering collaboration, what does that actually mean to you?
You want to take this one, Chris?
Sure. It's such an open term as well. Like it could mean a whole bunch of things. So for me, I would. It kind of depends on where you're looking. So for me, I would start at, what does that look like for engineering and the rest of the business? And it's funny, as I do more consulting with companies rather than being in charge of the delivery. Ultimately, what you should be able to do is go to any CTO, VP of Eng, or even any team leader, and ask them about overall company strategy, their customer base, their product future, their sales strategy, and actually get some really detailed answers. Because what that means is engineering and sales and product and design and marketing are all intertwined and working in the same way. But I find quite often that doesn't happen. And I think that, so for me, when I hear engineering collaboration, it is about engineering and everything else. Engineering and product and design is kind of a given. Like I would presume that it just has to work. There is no option. Engineering and the rest of the business is one of the biggest things that I see can kind of go off the rails. And that's where I think collaboration is fairly critical.
And maybe I'll build on that if that's okay. You know, I think when I think about collaboration, I think definitely, as Christopher said, around the understanding the business, essential working with designers and product people. And for some of the things that I would be looking for is kind of how much does a team member, say an engineer, see their role as just the writing code or engineering side? So when I think about a good collaborator, they're not just focused on their sort of part of the value chain. They're really looking at helping work flow through the value chain from, are we solving the right problem? Are we solving an important customer problem? Can we solve it simpler? Do I have the skills to solve this problem well, or can I bring in other people who can help us come up with a better way to solve this problem as either a designer or an engineer? And so, that sort of mentality, I think, is a really huge indicator for me about collaborative people, in that they're willing to sort of see themselves beyond just the sort of box that they're in, and willing to sort of have maybe uncomfortable discussions in a field that they're not experts in, but they're doing so because they want to see work flow through. Another sign that I'd be looking for collaboration is also, their willingness to help other team members. I'll go back to about the system and structure. One of the earliest teams I worked on, we all were measured by individual velocity. So, we all had story points that we all had to deliver each iteration sprint. It was a terrible environment to work in for collaboration, because of course everyone was really, trying to hit their numbers first, and then they would actually think about helping other people. And so, there's disincentives in that structure, but, a good engineer will help, share their experience or advice, or give feedback early to another team member if they're struggling, because they want to collaborate. And so that's another sign that I'd be looking for, which is, helping workflow across the board, which is often about, maybe a code review, a design session, or, sharing advice and experience, which will mean a little bit of self-sacrifice sometimes. And so, I think that's something I'd be looking for from team members, which is not them once again focused on their own individual work, but on the sort of greater good of the team, and what that team is trying to achieve.
No, like there is so much there in what both of you just said. I think there's really great things to dive into. Christopher, I love how you set up kind of, there's two types of collaboration. There's within the team, which is like table stakes, like absolutely must work as a team. And there's also the broader ecosystem of a product group, designers, product leaders, executive, business owners, stakeholders, they all need to work together as a team. And the thing that I'm learning from you two is that engineering is absolutely situated to empower and up level that level of collaboration, right? We may shirk that responsibility onto someone else, but really it is up to us in engineering to really make that cohesive, which I love, because we've definitely in the data. I mean, and I'm talking from all the flow product analysis we've done. Like, you can definitely see when it's not the case, when when product managers are like shipping like really ambiguous stuff, it's causing all kinds of turn to the engineering team, where they're changing things, or we're missing stuff. There's so much opportunity to really up level that of how we work together, and that really is the responsibility of engineering to lead the charge in that, which I think is definitely something we should all take away. The other thing too I like is this idea of like team versus self, Patrick, which I think is really great. Like, as a team doing well, or am I just like crunching on hitting my, especially if you like, it's very rare I find a team that's like, you've got a velocity number to hit, but like, that's so important in terms of like, how much are we enabling a team to strengthen over time? Because as you know, roughly, if you're sitting there, on average, 20% of your engineers have been on the job for less than a year. And if you're growing, that's like times that by 3, right? Because of how much we're expecting new engineers to take on. The more and more we strengthen those engineers, the better we're going to be. And we've shown that if you are better at crafting good code review, for instance, you're actually going to drop that onboarding time by half, which is just going to go to that effect of helping the team. And really, we should be measuring as a team, not on the individual level. So yeah, great comments for you both. So we kind of have skirted around this idea, but like, when you have a team that's just hitting on all cylinders, they're rocking it at communicating, reviewing code, working together, what should I expect from a result standpoint? Is this just a nice fluffy benefit, or is there like hard business results that come from having a better collaboration process as a team?
Yeah, so in my experience, there's lots of benefits around this. So one thing is, I think a highly performing team, they can kind of deal with surprises a lot more. So, when there's a reshuffle emergency, as a leader, you're not the person who feels that you have to sort of wear all of that on your shoulders, because you have a whole capable team that can rally around that problem, swarm on that thing, move it out of the way, and then sort of go back to sort of the work. I think what I also see is, if you're thinking about sort of flow of work, you tend to see a lot less sort of rework. So like Christopher was saying, with improving teams, they're not just simply saying, oh yeah, we have this problem, let's just fix it. But they're actually going, okay, how do we stop this type of problem from happening again? Is it to do with our collaboration with our specifications or requirements or user stories, whatever you might use? Let's try to work on that. Because trying to sort of triage it within the team isn't really sort of working. And so you see this sort of process improving where you might get signs of it's a little bit more maybe predictable or a little bit more stable. So estimates and sort of actuals are sort of getting closer together. Less sort of rework in terms of bugs or things found later in the process, because they're sort of thinking about things more upfront, so that there's less surprises and things kind of move through. Of course, that's not always the case, because there's software is unpredictable. But more or less things are sort of flowing relatively well, instead of sort of going back and forth between sort of roles or people. So there's some of the things that I would be looking for. And definitely businesses benefit because they get to try and experiment things a lot quicker with a lot more results.
No, that's great. Yeah, Christopher, same question to you.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the turning around of work, the reduction in wasted effort, also the time wasted on consensus as well. Like the teams can wrap themselves around all sorts of in a complete mess when they're not working together. Things like how many personal issues come up, a reduction in ego battles. I mean, we're talking about a group of engineers here that will happen. So when they are really good at communication, when they are really good at reviewing code and working together, that stuff reduces hugely. And it also becomes less about like the harmony between engineering, product design, and everyone else goes up quite a bit. And that's invaluable. There are a whole bunch of measurements about how quickly work can come out and reduce effort. But also when you think about when you're running engineering teams, how much effort do you put into making sure everyone is working in the right way? And like Patrick said before, is it for the greater good, or is it for the good of the individual? And that gets in the way more often than you'd think. And so a good team is there for the team and is there for what they are building for the company around them.
I think there we might be setting up this kind of false comparison between the good of the team and the good of the individual. I think what I've found is that the good of the team actually does mean good for the individual.
Absolutely.
Like whenever I've been on a great team, that's always propelled my trajectory much more than me, cranking myself. I think that's good. And we're hitting all these things, rework, how much churn, like, are we actually like moving the needle to where we want to be, which is ultimately gonna build a healthier, happier team that's gonna love coming to work, and turnover is gonna drop because we all feel empowered to really make a difference for our customers, which is at the end of the day, like why we're showing up, right? So, and I love that. So, okay, so let's flip it. So we've talked about the positive. Let's go look at what are some signals for when things are not working right? What are some things I should be watching out for as a leader to know I should go focus on this, and this is where I should spend my time as a leader to go fix?
Christopher?
Yeah. Meeting time goes up, way up. People are locked in meeting rooms and conferences and all sorts of things. Cycle time goes up. If you're in the stand-ups, what you'll see often is the same stuff happens every single day. Like, I'm working on this today, and I've been working on this for the last 4 days, and I'll be working on this for the next 4 days as well. Arguments in code reviews, time spent waiting in a code review or for an architectural review reaches a bottleneck. And also the lead time before engineers even start something goes up. So it's a very, very simply, those are some of the bigger warning signs that I see. Patrick, how does that fit in?
Absolutely. And I think overall, I kind of think about the number of kind of interventions you have to do as a leader or manager. So I think a lot of the cases that Christopher sort of explained, I think it's kind of like, well, if you leave them, that's going to sort of pull the team down. And at some point you kind of say, well, I have to do something about that. And so when I think about, how many actions I am kind of forced to do because nobody is taking care of that, that's definitely a big sort of indicator that I'd sort of be thinking about. And, it goes back to the picture that Christopher was also saying about good leadership isn't really about, you being at the center of everything that's happening. Because, once you go on holidays or something, then your team will probably stop performing. And so, what you really want to have is you want to be there to be a sort of safeguard for when there are emergencies or when, the team is sort of locked in debate and you can help move that sort of team forward. But it shouldn't be an everyday affair. And if you have to sort of intervene in conversations or you have to kind of nudge people about, where's that workout? It's been stuck for like a week. Do you need help? That's telling you something about, maybe a lack of clarity or a lack of expectations or sort of personal conflicts that you have to sort of resolve in the team so that you can get to a point where you don't have to intervene all the time. So that would be my like guiding heuristic overall.
Yeah, I think those signals are really, really key. And to be honest, like my initial reaction to both of those is like, ugh, that sounds like a lot, And hopefully, if you're listening, like you're not in a a situation where you're hitting all 6 of those signals at the same time, right? But we've all been there, right? And so like it can feel very, very tough to like start to try to dig yourself out of that hole. What's the first step? Because like if I can't go tackle 6 things to go fix, like where do I start?
Yeah, Patrick, that's a good one.
Yeah. So like with everything, I always say that there is no perfect team and no perfect organization, but it doesn't matter if you're getting better. And I think the thing that is the difficult part of leadership is always asking the question is what has the most impact? And so when it comes down to, if you are facing, also get the team to rally around, something that they can agree on and move forward. The situations really depend, but that's the hard part, is that you have to kind of make a judgment call around what you think will have the most impact, sort of fix it or like work on it. And hopefully the next week you can work on something different.
Yeah, for me, I agree. I've always had the philosophy that whenever I've gone into a team or a new team, my goal is to get out as fast as I can. Because essentially, like ultimately, you shouldn't be needed as that person that's in there, right? Like Patrick said, the you kind of have to. So engineers are really good at staying in the place that you put them. And so if you cordon off a group of engineers and say, okay, this is your job, these are the people that you're allowed to talk to, and this is all you can do, they'll generally just stay there and do that. And so I feel like your role as an engineering leader is to get the team, make them feel open to doing it, have them do the collaboration, and engineering leaders can tend to be or want to be the conduit for all of those conversations. It's like, oh, you have a problem, let me go do this. And it's kind of like the old Scrum Master philosophy of all the stuff you don't want to do, give it to me and I'll go do it. What that does, though, is it stops the team from doing anything like that and stops that collaboration. So getting out of the way and making sure you're not the pipeline. And product managers tend to do that sort of stuff as well. And I think also that if you hire the right team, people who are good communicators, then they can form the glue around that. So, and one of the ways I kind of explain this, and it's harder when people aren't into sport because the analogies don't work. But if you're into basketball and you think of Bill Russell, right, in the Celtics, Bill Russell was that person. He was that glue. He wasn't always the person who was the top scorer. He wasn't always the person who was the standout star in that team, but he made that team tick. So you compare like a Michael Jordan to a Bill Russell. The team of the Celtics with Bill Russell was such a better team, whereas Jordan was the star individual. And so that's where I think like that glue that holds it and that communication is a huge part of that. So if you can hire the right people that are in that, who can facilitate that communication, that collaboration, that's a big job in itself.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, I think what I've learned from those comments is that there's kind of two things here. The one is, we may feel as an engineering leader that our job is to have the answer to solve that problem, but in reality, that answer is probably already simmering within the engineering group, and they know how to solve for that. And then the second thing really is, your job then becomes not someone who's solving the problem, but someone who reduces the problem. I think it's the power of choosing one big thing to work on, and really focusing your team on, oh, you know what, I'm sitting in a retrospective. This is literally identical to the last retrospective we had. We're talking about the same exact things. Let's break that down and talk about one thing. What's one thing? Let's go look at how we did 2 weeks from now. And really, to your point, Christopher, like, you're trying to work yourself out of a job. Once I've empowered my team to go do that for themselves, then I'm moving on to other things, and that's exactly what we should be aiming for. So I love that a lot. Okay, so we're kind of at time, and I think this has been a great conversation. I hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as I have. I tend to like to ask one final question, because we cannot solve the universe in 35 minutes. But for you two, tell me more. What are your resources? Like, where do you go to continue to sharpen not only your technical skills but also your leadership abilities?
Patrick.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Thanks. So I have an odd answer for this, a very non-traditional answer. For leadership, as far as I've experienced it and seen successes in it, my experience being a father of of 3 children is the best leadership experience I've ever had in my life. And reading a whole bunch of parenting books. It sounds odd, but it's the humbling experience of having kids, whether they listen to you or not listen to you, is huge, is enormous. And I talk like real humble, not like humble like when you post on LinkedIn and say, I'm so humble that I got this massive promotion or all these awards, as in like being humble when your kids don't listen to you and you have to figure out a different way to help them. So those sorts of things are huge for me. But there's also, so there's 3 books that I'm just going to show on the screen that are really, really, like recently are really good. So one is, oh, you can't see it on here. So An Elegant Puzzle by Will Larson is awesome. Mindset, Carol Dweck. And one that I've read recently is called The Captain Class by Sam Walker. And it is about the forces that keep the world's greatest sports teams together. And it is an eye-opener.
Oh, that's great. I love that answer. I did not expect walking into this that I would have the advice to go do up my parenting knowledge after this. So that's great. Patrick, how about you?
So I don't have kids, so I don't have a real life parenting experience to draw upon. But I think one of the things I like hearing is other people's stories. And this is the hard thing about leadership, is that I don't think there's one true way. It depends on your strengths, depends on your situation. But what you can do is you can learn from other people's stories. And so I read a lot of books around leadership, around different skills. None of them have like the right answer, but they give you an idea about what you might use and what you might feel works for you, given your style in a certain sort of situation. So I just read a lot. Yeah.
All right, I love that. Okay, so we do need to go back and do this slower because you have a couple of people asking. Can we repeat the names of the 3 books you just mentioned? I'm going to actually throw it in the chat as we do it, so we get it. So we just cover it right now. So once again, give me the names of those books, Christopher.
The Captain Class by Sam Walker.
So Captain Class.
The Captain,
yeah. Okay.
Captain Class. Mindset by Carol Dweck. If you ever heard anyone say growth mindset, that's where it really came from. And An Elegant Puzzle by Will Larson. Will used to work for Lyft,
right?
I think. Oh, sorry, Uber and Stripe.
So I'll caveat that I may not have spelled the authors correctly on this chat, but hopefully with that, oh wait, I just chatted to the panelists, so I'm not sure. Kristen, can you help me somehow post that to everyone so they can see that? And that way we can.
I double down on Patrick's comments though. Also, like, read everything and trust nothing.
True.
Cool. Looks like we're getting that posted out here too, so you've got those. So this is great. Hey, well, thank you again. Thank you for getting up so early in the morning, Christopher. I really enjoyed the conversation. Definitely looking forward to hearing more from you in the future. Thank you so much, Patrick. So yeah, we'll let you go, and we will. I'll turn the time back to Jacob for a moment to introduce our next section.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat and Chris. What amazing insight that was. For our final discussion, we will hear from Pluralsight's workforce transformation experts, Lilac Moore, and she'll be joining Austin Bagley. Off to you, Austin and Lilac.
Awesome. All right, well, I'll introduce Lilac for a minute here. So I'm not sure allowed to say this, but she is one of my favorite engineers to work with. We've been working together for the last couple of years. She leads significant portions of the Flow product. So, and hopefully maybe in the future you can get more chance to talk to her and get more insight into how they built some things here for us. But I do want to stick with the theme today, Lilac, in terms of, I think there was so much today to talk about from Christopher and Patrick about engineering collaboration, some of the signals we look for and how we can kind of spot that in the data and really help empower our teams. Like all of that was very, very applicable. But before we begin, like just Lilac, give us a quick introduction to yourself. Tell me more about yourself, your team, what you guys are working on.
Yeah, so Christopher's comment about being a parent and how that helps with leadership really touched me. I have 5 kids, so I always joke that they've taught me everything I need to know about servant leadership. But in my regular day job, I lead the data visualizations teams for Pluralsight Flow. These are the teams responsible for the Flow reports. So we take all the imported commits and pull requests and ticket data and then turn it into insights for customers.
That's great. And then we'll kind of talk through actually one specific module about that, which is review and collaborate. We'll kind of go into that. But before, maybe to kind of help just kind of dovetail and connect to the conversation earlier, how do you view your role as a leader?
So as a leader, I need to take accountability for the outcomes of my team. So I always have to be focused on like the success criteria, which is, can we deliver value to customers in an efficient way? And we're always looking on ways we can do that better. Over the past year, Flow engineering has gone through a lot of transformation, and we're moving towards a model that increases team autonomy. But you can't just take a bunch of engineers, put them together and say, now you're a team, you own this piece of functionality, go make good decisions. Yeah, go make good decisions. So yeah, my job as a leader is to develop this work culture that supports that model. So I'm doing a lot of coaching, making sure the teams have tools to be successful. And that's where the metrics come in. So if it's done well, metrics can really be a backbone for a culture of empowered teams and continuous improvement.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's dive into that, right? Let's go open up the product and look into that. If we focus on this kind of theme we've been going on today, around collaboration, if we're talking specifically about that topic and concept, how has Flow helped you improve the level and the quality of collaboration on your team?
Yeah, so we love using our own product, but Flow isn't something we're forcing onto the teams. It's a tool that the teams want to use because it enables them to have conversations about what's really important, which is how team members are showing up for each other, that collaboration conversation. So we look at a couple of things. We look at collaboration within a team to increase code quality, collaboration across teams to prevent knowledge silos, and then faster onboarding for team members, and the ultimate goal, which is getting features to production quickly. So I can share my screen and show.
Yeah, let's dive into that. I think if we take that first one, really talk about that that inter-team collaboration. Let's kind of dive in there first.
Yeah, so at Pluralsight, we have a couple ways of approaching this. We have some teams that part of their team culture is doing a lot of pair programming and mob programming, which is a great way of collaborating because everyone's right there, they're involved in the code. Here in this work log report, you can see for Team Prime Directive, when you see these hollow bubbles, those are all group programming commits. So here you can see there's lots of co-authored by, and that's how we know that it's a group commit. So nearly the entire team was sitting down and focusing on some of these commits. So you have immediate knowledge sharing and you're streamlining your process. So there's still some individual work that goes on and some pull requests, but those pull requests just get moved through the system really fast. And I did want to show you another report where we can see how fast they're doing that. So here in PR resolution, this report basically reports on when you start a PR, how long does it take before that PR is closed, that code is merged into production, or the PR just gets closed and canceled. And this team, because they do so much pairing and mobbing, it's just a really streamlined process. Like you can see there's a couple outliers, but in general, the time to resolve a pull request is less than half an hour, which is terrific.
Which is like scarily fast if you're not doing mob pair priming, right? Like that's really quick.
Yeah. And we do need to make sure, like in this case, we do know that they do a lot of collaboration, but when teams look at this, we want to make sure they don't focus just on this metric, because then you're losing the code quality. Then you're just saying, looks good to me, let's push it, and now we can have better metrics. So let's go and take a look at the teams that report to me. Actually, they do some pairing, but mostly it's individual work. We have a remote culture and we have team members in different time zones. So this gives them a lot of flexibility. If someone wakes up early, in one time zone, they can get some work done without waiting for anyone else. So here, it's not completely fair to compare the two teams because they're working on different types of things. But what we want to look for is you have some individual commit activity, and then you have a lot of pull request activity, which is good to see because that means that the team's collaborating, the team is providing feedback on the pull requests, they're asking questions, they're working together. But if you take a look at our PR resolution, it's not bad. This is what you would expect. We've got some outliers, but there's room for improvement. So if the team focuses, let's just get pull requests through the system quickly. Let's make agreements around that. I encourage all the teams to co-create agreements for how they work together. If you go back to that example of throwing engineers and saying you're a team, even if these are the best engineers, you're not going to really deliver good value to production.
Yeah, that goes back to what Patrick and Christopher were saying earlier. Like one of the signals of I have a team that can improve on collaboration, which is going to ultimately help us as a team, is we're letting things hang out. We're not actually jumping on and helping other people. And this really kind of shows you how that is, and it's a way for the team to go and look at that for themselves, going, you know what, we can make some adjustments as a team to our approach.
Yeah, exactly. So here, they take about 16 hours to close a pull request, and they can decide as a team if that's okay, because that means that other people are doing the reviews, aren't doing as much task switching and context switching. But in general, we want to get these done well. So a lot of it is just working as a team and making these agreements and holding each other accountable. And something I like about this report is you can also zoom in. So we can zoom in on like these really, the PRs that took a long time to close, and then be able to dig into them and say, like, what took so long? Is there a behavior that we shouldn't be doing? For example, creating pull requests and just letting them sit there because we're not sure they're really in progress and they shouldn't be pull requests, or they should be like draft pull requests. And then So for some of these really long ones, you see the last comment is Kristen, who's the leader, said, let's go ahead and just close this. So this is another point where you can't use the metrics to punish, you use them to inform. So here it's a way where, yes, they needed to be closed. So maybe it affects our metrics and it creates some anomalies, but overall we learned about our process and we became better.
Yeah, and this is kind of like your table stakes, right? This is like basic, like how are we working as a team? Are we supporting each other? Are we getting things moved through quickly? So we can, be connected to the customer. One of the big themes of today. I think the other thing I love talking about is this idea of like cross-team collaboration, right? And knowledge sharing. This idea that like it's not just about jumping on quickly, but it's about how can we empower engineers to really understand, be very, very confident in what they're working in.
Yeah, so part of the reason that we moved to autonomous teams is because we want teams to be accountable for their own piece of the product and be able to push code to production without having to coordinate with a lot of teams. But the term autonomous is a little tricky because it doesn't mean that they operate in a bubble and they get to make all their own decisions. There's some decisions that are definitely localized decisions, but there's other ways of sharing knowledge that's going to benefit the entire engineering org. So one of my favorite reports is this review collaboration, and you can see how knowledge sharing happens through the pull request process. When you're reading someone's code to review it, then you can ask questions, you can understand how they're doing things, and that's great knowledge to share across teams, because then you can see, oh, this team is doing this thing, which my team can also use. So I want to point out Dewanshu, Team Sizzle looked at this report a couple months ago, and we noticed that all of Dewanshu's PRs were reviewed by one person, by me. And we came to it from the point of view, okay, this isn't something Dewanshu's doing wrong. Like what's going on here? And Dewanshu's working with a technology, Apache Spark, that none of the rest of the team members are familiar with. So we took this report as an opportunity to say, okay, let's share that knowledge. We want Dewanshu to be able to go on vacation, and if something breaks in this piece of code, we don't want to have to, call him up and say, come fix it. We want
You're the only one on call. Like that is the absolute worst place to be in from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And it deals also with career growth. Like he doesn't want to be pigeonholed as just this Spark expert on this team if he wants to grow in his career and do some other things. So I love seeing this. Now, if you click on Dewanshu's PRs, you see that he's spread that knowledge with the pull request reviews from members all across the engineering organization. So what I look for here is where it says with selected team, that means those members are not members of this team, but they're getting insight into some of that code.
And that starts small. Like we're not going to overnight have an expert just by having them review code, but as they get more comfortable, they may not be the one doing the final sign off, but they're in there. They're really like understanding how it's working, and you're really seeing the time and investment they're taking to enabling this better knowledge sharing throughout the organization, which I think is great. And I think there's another side benefit, which I think is also cool that you mentioned, and we kind of identified this earlier with Patrick and Christopher, was this idea of, is the leader the bottleneck? And I think you kind of said you actually were kind of the bottleneck because you were the only one reviewing that code.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I noticed is I was the only one reviewing actually almost all the PRs for this team, which makes me the bottleneck. And it gets into a gatekeeper mentality, which is just not good for the team. You want the whole team to feel like anyone can be responsible for pushing code once they get the correct reviews. So now Kristen is the leader of this team. And something that I coach her to is make sure that you're not the bottleneck. I know you're interested in everything that's going on and you want to keep an eye on it, but don't be the gatekeeper.
No, I love that. Well, I think we've got time for maybe one more example, Lilac. I think the best thing to do would be kind of the third thing you mentioned was this idea of onboarding and how we can really enable that. We obviously identified earlier that it's a huge factor for companies, especially for growing. How do you approach that for your team? You've been a part of that for many years.
Yeah, we actually have a new apprentice on our team. The apprentice program, it's like an internship program, but it's for people who came from non-traditional paths. And we've got Olivia, who joined the team just a couple weeks ago. She came from a finance background. And we like to see this. So Olivia's pull request has been reviewed by people across the organization. And something that a lot of people, when they're new and they're onboarding, is they have imposter syndrome. I think we've all had it at some point where you feel like, I don't know as much as other people on the team. Maybe I'm not worthy of this position. I'm worried about what other people think of me. So Olivia right now doesn't feel as comfortable reviewing other people's pull requests. So if you see here, she's only reviewed one pull request. So what we're working on is making sure we have a culture of psychological safety. It's okay to go in and ask questions, and it's okay to review work. Even if you don't feel that you can approve a pull request, you can still ask questions, and it's a great way to learn. That's something we're doing. And then we're also taking a look, just that's Olivia's metrics in general. This is for the entire Sizzle team. And let's go into Olivia. So she's gone from about 1 coding day to 4 the last couple of weeks, but she's committed to committing codes each day, but she's only committing it once a day. So that's something, and it has very high efficiency, which to me, that's a signal that it's some perfectionism. Like, I don't want to commit code until I feel like it's ready to show the world.
Yeah, it's a valid worry, right? Like I'm new on the team. I want to like prove myself really early, but that actually may be impeding me in some ways, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, so that just gets back into the team culture, collaboration, psychological safety, and feeling that it's okay to commit things even if you feel they're in progress or you need help there.
Yeah, it's great. This has been really, really great, Lilac. I wish we had more time with you. I think the one thing I'd like to everyone to understand and share is that there's a lot of opportunity within the data. But going back, it's really about that power of fun. Like, what's the one thing I should work on? What's the one thing I should work on next? And really empowering the team to tackle that together as a unit. And the way that you approach that and talked about that, you very much expressed how that works on your team. It's not a top-down thing. It's not, here's what Lilac said, here's what we got to do. It's like, as a team, what should we go work on next? Because ultimately, I want to be closer to the customer. I want to be empowered to really enable them to do what I want to build a great product. And this is how we're going to go move the needle and create a great system for myself as an engineer. And yeah, as a side benefit, I don't want to be the only one on a call, right? And so this is great. And for those who want to learn more, please reach out to us. We're happy to go and provide custom use cases to you in terms of how Flow really connects to your engineering teams. Every team is a different. We have some very much some common best practices, but we'd love to spend more time with you if you're interested. So with that, thank you for your time, Lilac, and thank you for everyone's time for being here for an hour this morning. And I will turn it back to you, Jacob.
Thank you. Well, everyone, our time together has come to an end.